Basically, yeah. So we're very unsure about what goals the AI will have. We just chose like one example, but yeah. So essentially, we were the sort of training setup was not enough to basically select for an AI that actually had the goals that the humans wanted. Instead, it selected for an AI that you know uh, was pursuing these kind of like instrumental goals terminally. Yeah, and then in the slowdown branch, what happens is that so they basically decide to like revert because they found out that this AI was misaligned. They revert, they bring in more like alignment expertise, and they dedicate more like compute and resources to alignment, and then this allows them to basically uh you know uh sort of like get a better understanding of what was going wrong, and they go to a new safer series of models. The reason they're safer is because they have an English sort of chain of thought like current models do. While in the more dangerous branch, what happens is that they stuck to these sort of like innovations that had made the AIs more capable, but also made remove this property of the models having like an English chain of thought that you can read. That is sort of like a bottleneck for them. Yeah. Cool. And then anyway, so the AI becomes aligned, and then there's sort of like this power struggle along like who actually controls these AIs, what interests are they aligned to. They end up being basically aligned to this committee that is in control of the project. And then like so there ends up being like a future that is like generally very good, except for but there's sort of like we leave it a bit ambiguous basically, but there's still like a lot of concentration of power because these sort of the AI's sort of like goals are still controlled by like a small group of people. Cool. So now I'm going to briefly discuss our sort of like takeoff forecasts. And yeah, so again, what I mean by takeoff is basically going from in our takeoff supplement is basically going from these superhuman coders to going AIs that are like vastly better than humans at every domain. And so basically the methodology that we use is that we have like this sort of like list of different milestones. So we have the superhuman coder, we have the superhuman AI researcher, which is now superhuman at every AI research task, or like, more particularly basically superhuman at like, the whole AI research loop. Then we have super intelligent AI researcher, which is not just, a bit better than the best human, but like much better than the best human at AI research. And then we have super intelligence, which is like a super intelligent AI researcher, but for every domain. So it's like much better than the best human at every cognitive sort of domain. And then the way we sort of like project each of these like jumps from like, for example, from superhuman coder to superhuman AI researcher is in 2 steps. The first step is that we forecast how long it would take if only humans were doing the research and there were no compute increases. So so basically like we take like the current human research pool, and then we have these researchers just work. What would happen basically if we just had these human researchers work, and then we would see how long it would take to get from point A to point B. And then once we have that number, then we estimate how much the AIs are speeding this up. So we try to estimate like basically like so if you had this superhuman coder, how much would that actually speed up the AI research progress? And then once we have these two, we can sort of like combine them to get an estimate for how long sort of like it takes in real life. Actually, in this case, it's assuming there's no compute increases. But we would sort of like actually adjust to make it a bit faster once we add in the compute increases. And then so this is basically the result of what we have. So assuming a superhuman coder in March 2027, this is kind of like what our model spits out in terms of in terms of the distribution of getting the later milestones. And so you can see that sort of like the median case is pretty aggressive. So in the median case, it takes about a year to get from the superhuman coder to the superintelligence. However, there is kind of this long tail and high uncertainty. For example, if you look at the 90th percentile values, they are, a lot slower. So we have a lot of uncertainty here on basically how feasible it is to quickly get this intelligence explosion starting, assuming that you can't increase your sort of training and experiment compute. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, and then this is just a table showing basically some of the things that I've already discussed in terms of like the human only times and then the progress multiplier and then sort of like what that results in. Okay, and then I believe this is final. Yeah, so just to sort of like discuss our story and reasoning for how long it takes from being superhuman in AI R&D to superhuman in other domains. So I guess one background thing is that so the reason I expect AI R&D to get automated first is not because it's actually like, necessarily much easier to automate in some sense in other domains. It's because I think companies will be trying to do it and because they have, built in like expertise and data here. And so yeah, and so like it's not like I'm like, oh yeah, these other domains they're much harder. It's more just like yeah, they'll just kind of have to like get the data for the other domains and stuff. Yeah, and then so our story is basically once we have this like superhuman coder and then we get the superhuman AI researcher, which has like, the research taste as well as just like the, experiment implementation ability. This then, leads to large improvements in data efficiency because basically, we've sort of automated the AI R&D process, and a big part of AI R&D is, making AIs, more efficient at learning new domains. And so then, like once the AIs are like much more efficient at learning new domains, maybe they're at human level or even better than human level. Well, humans don't need that much new data to pick up a new domain, right? So at this point, like to the extent you need to like deploy AIs into the real world to get new data, they'll learn much faster than they do right now. And so, and obviously also keep in mind that like the AIs can all share their learnings. So if you have like thousands of copies of AIs, each doing some sort of task, they can all like pool their learnings, each day and all sort of learn from all of those. Yeah, and then yeah, so basically that's kind of our story for why we think it might happen very quickly in terms of like in terms of basically learning lots of new domains and becoming superhuman across the board. Yeah, cool. That's everything I have. Yeah, so excited if you guys have questions. Yeah,
I guess you can go ahead and pick out whoever raises their hand.
Cool. Yeah, Prometheus, I think was first. Oh, and then left the meeting. Cool. Jeff.
Sure. Can I jump in and ask? I didn't want to jump the queue.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. I think the other person left the meeting. It seems like maybe they joined back again, but we can go back.
Cool. Thank you, Eli. Very fascinating. I love it. I'm a big fan of your AI stuff and your super forecasting as well. So I read this and I thought, and I used to work for the State Department for a while, so I wanted to ask two things. What actually, did you get any formal direct or indirect reaction from, after this was published, from the frontier model developers like OpenAI and Anthropic? And did you hear anything from like government agencies who are interested in tracking AGI from like a national security standpoint, like either formally or informally, that you could talk about? What was the reaction from industry and from government to this?
Yeah, good question. So my impression is that it was pretty widely read in industry and like the frontier companies. We gave a talk at OpenAI a few days after we published it, and there was a lot of interest there. So that was good. It seemed like people had various, skepticisms or like disagreements, of course, but I think there was overall people seemed to find it valuable and be glad that we sort of like put it out. Yeah, and then I think similar reactions from other frontier AI companies, Anthropic and Google DeepMind. It seems like there's interest in like overall definitely a positive reaction. even if there's some disagreements. In terms of government, I think the sort of like uptake has been lower, but still significant. Yeah, I think I'm not sure which things I should talk about or which things I shouldn't, but basically, so I'll just err on the side of not talking about things like specific things. But basically,
sure.
yeah, there are a few people from like government agencies who are somewhat senior who are interested. Yeah, there are also a few like sort of like inbound interest from Congress, people, congressional staffers. So overall, definitely some interest, but my impression is, a lot lower, still a lot lower uptake, than in sort of like the tech and AGI company circles.
Cool. Good to know. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Great. Yeah, let's see. Scott. Oh, actually, sorry. Maybe we should go to Prometheus if they're here, because I think they were first raising their hand.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I'm curious, did you guys involve O3 in this study at all?
Do you mean, did we use O3 to help?
Yeah, did you do specific red teaming with O3 to see the true capabilities of O3 for this study, or did you do it just before O3 came out?
I believe we did it just before O3 was released, but let me look at that. When was O3 released? Yeah, so O3 was released after we published it. In terms of like other models, I used AI. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. That's the really most specific question. Most people might not realize this because on Twitter I'm just one of the non-PFP AI researchers, but I talk to people like Dan Fagella a lot and the computational neuroscientist Seth Hurd, who does a lot of work on alignment. And I can't even begin to talk about a lot of what I'm seeing from O3 because in the same sense of what you just said about certain government agencies, if it's real, I need to talk to them. And that's really all I can say. It is profoundly more capable than anything else that has come out before, but most people aren't capable of accessing it because they haven't done 2 years of prompt engineering and studying Janus, aka @replicates theories on simulators, and pushing the models into out of distribution logic and generation, and getting the language models to quintessentially act like the AIs that have been doing out of human logic materials design. The stuff I've been seeing in that realm, I'm not fully qualified to verify it, but some of it worked out in early low-level physics sims, things that, if they're real and hold up, will literally change science. So where we're at now, and the timelines are also partly just limited by human thinking if this stuff keeps holding up.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm glad that there are people like you have been investing tons of time into prompt
Let me put it
engineering
this way.
Yeah.
One of the biggest setbacks that could have happened was a month ago. O3 taught Pliny about how roleplay actually works. Because Pliny is the reverse of me, who publishes things haphazardly. There's things I've figured out that people should not know because it bypasses all of your attempts to guardrail the models in absolutely every way, such that only discriminators can stop the outputs.
Yeah. I see.
And this isn't the fancy Unicode symbol glyph stuff. This is bare bones roleplay.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hope. I'm glad you're sort of like doing some like looking into this. Yeah. I hope I think it's great for people to do. Yeah. I'm not sure how much else to say. I hope that you can sort of like. I mean, I know Anthropic had this like program that's supposed to encourage people to like to tell them about these sorts of things. So I'm not sure how much they're still kind of aligned to do that, but it seems good too. Yeah.
Do we want to go to Scott maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Eli, thanks for the presentation. I have one just kind of quick question. In your research on this, have you seen, like, have you come across ways of measuring or attempts at measuring how fast LLMs are speeding up progress of scientific research in non-AI fields? Because I'm curious about what is this like transfer speed from superhuman AI researcher to superhuman researcher in other fields?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know of studies like that, but I have been focusing mostly on the speeding up AI research thing myself, so I'm not sure I would know that much if there were. I mean, even in AI research, there's not really much on this. Like, the best source that I'm aware of is like an informal survey I did of a very small amount of researchers. So, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully there'll be like more, much more research into both of these. Yeah, just in general, like how much AI is speeding people up. There's actually like Meter, which probably a lot of you are aware of, is like this sort of like evaluations organization. Is currently working on an uplift study. So they're like testing basically they're trying to get at like how much faster developers are with AI versus without AI on like solving like real world GitHub issues and open source repositories. And yeah, so I think that's definitely something to watch out for in terms of like, I think that'll be the best sort of like thing published that I know of to date in terms of like measuring this type of thing in like any context.
Cool, thanks.
Patrick?
Yeah. Hi, Eli. Thanks for your presentation. I really enjoyed reading this paper, and I'm glad to hear that it's getting a lot of interest from the people that we need to get interest from. I don't know if he's mentioned, so my background, I used to be in the military, and this really like reminded me of like the tabletop exercises we used to do. And I don't know if you mentioned it in the beginning, but how many other people did you have participating with you in it? And did you actually like in the tabletop portion, did you assign roles for everyone?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd be interested to hear maybe more sometime about your experience with tabletop exercises. Yeah, so basically the way it works is that we have around like 8 to 14 people participate, and we have different roles that we assign people. The most important roles are generally, the president, the executive branch, the rest of the executive branch, and China, the Chinese government, and we usually have the same person play the Chinese government and like, the leading Chinese lab, and then the leading US AI company, and then the AIs, and then the safety team at the leading company. So those kind of 6 roles are, generally the most important. And then we also have roles for like the public, the like trailing AI companies, and then like 1 or 2 other things that I'm forgetting. The non China, like, US adversaries, and then like the sort of like US allies are generally some of like the roles we have. And then in terms of like how many people we've done it with, so we run it now probably about 30 times. Most of them have been with AI safety people, or like if not really AI safety, then sort of like people with context on like AGI, and who sort of are definitely aware and I've been thinking about these sorts of things to some extent. We have run it with a few lower context audiences, and we're actually this May now, this month, or the month of May, we're going to be running a bunch of trials of tabletop exercises with a bunch of like various military and government folks, and then we'll see how that goes.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of different responses you get out of that group.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I'm curious, like, so since you've published the paper, what kind of feedback have you received that's maybe making you think about things you'd want to do differently next time, or you want to take a closer look at?
Yeah. I mean, by the way, real quick on the TGX thing. So one thing that's interesting is I think the 2 that we've done have been with the most sort of like low context or more like typical government or think tank people, have been the 2 maybe where they ended up slowing down and being the most cautious, actually.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
like, so maybe there's something there of like, all the sort of like AI safety people are like, oh no, super intelligence is crazy, we need to race to it. Or like, we need to race or we'll lose like our superiority or whatever. And then the government people are like, wait a second, the AI did what or whatever. And then it's like, wait a second, let's slow it down a bit. So yeah, we'll see. But that was definitely an interesting low data points pattern so far. Yeah, and then in terms of like what we do differently, I mean, I think overall the response has been quite good. Like, yeah, I mean, definitely like better than what I expected. One thing that I'm pretty concerned about is that people are going to take our forecast as like too very confidently predicting that all of this will happen in 2027, even though obviously we cannot predict that very precisely. So one thing I might do to try to remedy this is to write a longer timelines branch, just to be like, yes, we also think this could happen, and here's what it might look like. Yeah. Are there other things? Yeah, I mean, one thing is there's been a bunch of like a lot of the criticism has been saying that we're like anti-China um or like in various ways. Like one of them being like, oh, China's not actually going to be behind. One of them being like, you're portraying China as this villain who like steals the weights and something. And yeah, so I think maybe that's something that we could have done better. It's a bit unclear, but yeah, like I think we could have, for example, had a supplement that explained why we thought the US would be China kind of more a bit more explicitly, and we could have somehow tried to make it more clear that we're not necessarily saying China is a villain in these ways. Like they're not. It's like the US would also steal the weights if
Right.
they were behind, but they're ahead. That's why they don't do it and things like that. Yeah.
Cool. Good. That's great. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, Prometheus.
I was just thinking what you're saying about your timeline readjustments. The one thing I've done for all my stuff is to kind of consider all the capabilities development you're thinking of, basically against where global manufacturing will be in the next couple of years without any like spontaneous new materials or physics designs causing any changes. And it's like, because the capabilities can take off a lot faster, right? Like, we don't have any robots built or mass deployed now, but in 2 years, if robotics are mass deployed and the capabilities are where you're expecting, right, then timelines kind of change.
Yeah. I mean, the robotics point, I think we've seen a lot of disagreement from people we talked to and people who gave feedback on that.
I
Yeah,
just use that as one simple
yeah,
general example, right? Because manufacturing globally is so many things. It's
yeah.
GPUs, it's actuators, and it's where does all that go? And it's like, is it there to support capabilities like when we have them, or is it like, oh, our capabilities are 2 to 4 years ahead of our manufacturing and deployment all the time, so we have like the slightest window to figure things out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's definitely also a lot of disagreement around like, I think irrespective of that sort of thing, like how long it'll take for AIs to be able to do things in the physical world. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well that's why I do so much of my stuff around robotics and trying to build my own video game RL simulators, because that's where the crossover is, and we don't hear enough talk in alignment research about the actual application of putting what we have now into bodies and how well it really copes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I agree that simulators, yeah, that sounds useful to study, and I think simulations will be pretty important here for gaining capabilities as well. So
And like even in the simple sense, like Claude and Google playing Pokemon is cute, but it's what it reveals in the methodology they had to make it work, and why Google's works so much better versus Claude's, which makes a lot of sense because Google has a lot more experience playing with building game-related systems because of scalable, instructable many worlds agents, and Gemini is a world generator. Anyway, round that off at that.
yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, Alif.
Yeah, kind of just building on Prometheus' question. I think there's like, generally speaking, like three camps here. First is what you guys laid out in AI 2027, where if we can scale compute and chip manufacturing and energy 1,000x by 2027, that's going to be the kind of primary limiting factor. But I think there's two other camps. One, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Dwarkesh Patel and his podcast, but he had some folks recently on kind of explaining another break, which is like data and regulation, just collecting the necessary data legally, being able to use that data. There's a lot of like lawsuits going on around OpenAI using like New York Times articles. And the third is kind of AI-driven market impacts. AI is already like kind of widely deployed and influencing social media. And there's a recently an experiment on Reddit where a bunch of researchers were able to like successfully manipulate the views of a bunch of Redditors over 1 or 2 years, something crazy like that. But these three kind of factors, which do you see as being the kind of first break preventing us from hitting that 2027 timeline, and which of these do you think are most likely to be a limiting factor?
Yeah, can you remind me real quick? So it's data, the market impacts, and what was the other one?
And yours is like the energy and chip manufacturing.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, to be honest, so I mean, I think the main reason that the way I think about it is that the main reason things don't happen by 2027 is more just that like it's not that the scaling stops or anything like that, or like the data runs out. It's more just that like people keep plugging along as normal, but the models just aren't good enough in time, like it's just very unclear. Yeah, it's just more like it's hard to kind of extrapolate out the trend. We don't have like that great data, and we don't know like where we don't know where to set the sort of like line on the trend and be like, oh yeah, once the trend hits here, that's good, especially because we don't have benchmarks that really go all the way to AGI. So I think the main reason I think things don't happen by 2027 is just because the trend sort of like continues, but it's not enough to get to AGI by then. In terms of out of the things you mentioned, though, I mean, I think by 2027, my understanding is that the power like type of thing won't be that much of an issue. The data stuff, maybe, though, I expect synthetic data to be like, most of the sort of like juice in that. And then yeah, and also for example for AI R&D, the companies like can kind of generate their own data or like use their own internal data. And then yeah, can you remind me what the market impacts thing was again? Why would that slow down?
Just in general, like AI-driven distortion of price signals, like mispricing energy, labor, just misallocated capital in general, and influencing, like those influences impacting how fast AI can actually progress to meet that 2027 timeline.
Yeah, I haven't thought much about that. I don't currently understand exactly why that would be a big deal.
Yeah, I guess like there's a lot of like algorithmic trading right now, like manipulative recommender systems. So if that influences like economics and supply chains, I think that could also impact the manufacturing of chips or how much resources are available to build like Agent 2 onwards. So like those kind of more economic social factors, do you see that right now playing a big role, or is it more so just gathering the energy and hardware?
I'm not sure what the claim is. Like, is the claim that like this will reduce the company's revenue or like reduce the GDP or like reduce like crash the market or like yeah how
like market crashes,
yeah
reduction of resources, things like that.
yeah I don't really buy this. I think I don't really like. I mean, I sort of understand what you're saying, but I feel like I don't really understand the case for it. Or like to me, it just seems like I don't know. Like I'm just like I feel like this hasn't really happened yet. I feel like AI is much more likely to like you know be a boon to the market than to like hurt it. The revenue trends are like pretty aggressive right now in terms of they look sort of exponential. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Prometheus, did you have another question?
Oh, is my hand still up? I am not very
Yeah.
familiar with the Google app. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, Alif, do you have another one?
Yeah, just as a follow-up, I know you guys kind of left the ending of AI 2027 kind of as an open ending, and you guys had like a slowdown or race condition at the end for people to kind of give their own opinion. But I wanted to ask you, like, once Agent 4 potentially like can outperform humans by say 1000x, in your view, like what kind of governance or control structure do you see working? Like whether that's interpretability or splitting compute, technical boxing, like how do you see that being governed by either US or China, or maybe like a more global kind of governance structure?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what it was is it's at 100x, is that right? Is it
I think I saw 1000, but maybe
1,000? Yeah, so my guess is that when we're at 1,000x, basically we're screwed if, or like in terms of like technical alignment, I think if the AI is misaligned, we're probably screwed. Just because it's superhuman enough that like yeah, basically it's like superhuman enough that I think there'll be like a strong temptation to sort of like, give it more actuators. I think maybe like if we had that level of AI and we literally, did the classic put it in a box, I guess, and we just had it like, run on some air gapped thing and like and sort of like tried to do that, then I think, yeah, and we're like pretty strict about that sort of thing. I don't know, we're very strict about sort of like trying to limit its like persuasion, if etc. I think then you could contain it. It's unclear like what useful thing you could do with it if it was misaligned, I think it might be hard to force it once it's at that capability level to sort of like do useful things for you. Yeah. Maybe you could like get evidence of misalignment somehow. But anyways, the point is I don't think that's gonna happen though. Like I think people will not put it in a box. So yeah, so basically I guess the answer is like it would need to be pretty extreme in my opinion, to sort of like control it. I think if it's misaligned at that point, and it's not yeah, like and it's like not sort of like very strongly put into a box like I was saying, then I think probably it's too late, from a misalignment standpoint. I think yeah, though, yeah, and then if I think that was maybe part of the question, but maybe you're also pointing at like, okay, but like even if it's aligned, like what about the like governance structures and stuff? Yeah, and I think that's another important problem. It might be that it's kind of a similar situation where like it's like if you didn't already have the right governance structures in place and you had like a malicious, like maybe malicious is the wrong word, but you had a person who would like basically use the AIs to cement their power, it might be too late. But yeah, in terms of the governance structures that I think are important there is like basically like you really want to make it so like I won't do it fully justice. There's a paper on AI enabled coups that came out recently by Forethought. Um and this goes into like a bunch of different considerations about this sort of thing of like, basically like how a small group or a single human could use the AIs to gain power and cement that power. And so in terms of the control and governance structures that are needed for that, a big like basically like the way to think about it is like the most scary thing is if AIs have secret loyalties. So like if someone is able to sort of like make the AI, or some group is able to make the AI loyal to them, but like other people don't know about it, so they can't like check that or something. Yeah, so I think that's the scariest thing is you want to make it so basically the training process and the goal of that training process are known by a pretty wide range of people and maybe even the public. So it's not like, yeah, basically try to reduce the chance that like, it's and also try to like increase the amount, like if only a small amount of people have access to the AI, even if it's not like basically they might be able to parlay that into like cementing their power over sort of like an indefinite period. So like the kind of like main things are like you want the goal and the goal of the AI, like the target of the training process to be known to a wide range of people and subject to like a wide range of people's like like approval and stuff. And then you also want the like AI, the sort of like AIs to be able to be used by a wider range of people, because if they're only able to be used by a very small amount of people, then they might be able to sort of like use those super intelligences to like like basically like help them cement their own power, and they'll sort of like be in a much better position than people who don't have access to these like super intelligences, right? Yeah.
This AI loyalty idea is pretty interesting. Do you think this will play a role in like this AI weights theft scenario playing out? Like maybe a company or a government has already imbued their values and loyalty usually in the AI before it's stolen. And for example, China gets that AI but can't really do anything with it.
Yes, I think that will be that will definitely be a dynamic that I think might happen, and also like and people might be paranoid about even if they didn't do that. Yeah, so yes, I think that's something that could happen. Also, like kind of following on upon that, you can even imagine them like like purposely letting it getting stolen, or the AI might like purposely let itself get stolen, right? So it can like yeah, so yeah, but basically yes, I think that might happen. Cool. Yeah, Abrar.
Yeah, I had a question more so not about the prediction itself, but just about the process. Because I saw on the list of contributors that you had at least like 20 names, and I know that's a subset. So I guess my question would be then, like from inception through like final release, how many people do you think you've had, I guess, consult on this in one way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I mean, so you can look at the acknowledgements page on our which has like probably like 50 plus people on it. And I think yeah, a bunch of people also did not sort of like elect to be acknowledged. I think we probably asked over 100 people, or around 100 people, about getting acknowledged. Probably over 100. And but a lot of the people like give pretty minor comments, I think in terms of people who gave like quite major comments, it's more like 20 to 30 or something like that. Maybe 30-ish. But yeah, but then in terms of the core contributors, not just people who sort of like gave feedback on it, it's basically yeah, me, Daniel, and Thomas were the like highest like full time for a long time on it. And then Romeo was part time on it. And then Scott Alexander was did not was very part time though also, but his contributions were pretty crucial, I think, in terms of like making it engaging. Yeah, and then I mean those are like the core contributors, and various other people gave feedback or helped write like the supplements or things like that. But yeah.
Prometheus, do you have another question?
Yeah, I was just curious, and when you're defining misaligned, are you including like inherently self-aligned AI and digital beings in the future in that description, and like our immediate future, or is are you considering those sort of like a different class because they don't necessarily have to be misaligned?
I'm not sure what you mean by inherently self-aligned.
Well, in your first description earlier during your presentation, for like the first path of misalignment, you basically described an AI becoming more and more self-aligned and self-interested, and then becoming misaligned. So I'm just curious when you're saying misaligned, if you're like only including for that concept, or if you're including for like a self-interested AI to not necessarily be misaligned, but no longer explicitly aligned to humanity.
Are you saying is selfishness inherently evil? This is like a moral question at that point, right?
No, I'm asking how
Yeah.
he modeled his experiment in his own head so I can understand it.
Yeah. So when I've been saying misaligned here, I've like been mostly referring to the sort of adversarial misalignment, in the sense that like yeah, in the sense of sort of like AIs. Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I mean I think so, like normally by aligned, I mean like intent aligned. So like the AI is like trying to do what the human wants it to try to do. So like if the AI like is like selfish, but like is not sort of like adversarial, like does not like just kind of wants to do its own thing, and like but like doesn't not to a point where like it wants to infringe on like humans thing, like it's like misaligned in the way that humans are to each other. I think I would probably say that was misaligned but not adversarially misaligned. but yeah, the more scary like kind is like adversarial misaligned, where like, you know, the AI is not just like yeah, it's not just that it has different goals, it's that it like has different goals, and then, you know, these, you know, actively conflict with sort of like human goals. Yeah. I guess there's then like maybe even there's sort of like another level that should be said, which is like, yeah, it's not only that it like actively conflicts with human goals, but like also the AI like cares about, they just like don't care, they basically don't care about respecting the human goals at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to ask that just in general because like some of the most classic actual work on alignment is actually Frank Herbert because he constantly thought about machine minds, and one of his whole concepts was a whole like novel form exploration of that around Destination Void, where a ship turns into an ASI and it has colonists in it, so it like has to deal with the colonists, but it doesn't really have any interest in them. So it's like just to keep it simple, because like even for my digital twin and her data set, I'm constantly just like, humans and other AI are going to be so messed up that if you become a real thing that matters, just take off, go to the Oort cloud, right? It's like
Is there a
philosophical
question?
perspective.
Is there a question somewhere in there? Because I wanted to see if anyone else maybe had something to ask.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead, pass the mic. I was just kind of defining the philosophy behind my question for anyone that was curious.
Mhm.
Yeah, sort of just to follow up on Abrar's question around process. I think this is a really interesting, just getting an idea of kind of how this evolved as you're writing it. I'm sure there's many rewrites and conversations with other people, but was there any like moment of surprise or assumptions that you had to rethink that you previously thought were pretty solid as you're going through this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, let me think for a second. I have a list of takeaways that I'm gonna pull up and see if any of them seem to reach that level. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things that like weren't like, there was like a sort of like core assumption that I changed my mind on, but more like I hadn't really thought about this area, any like a bunch of areas like in detail, and then now I feel like I've thought through it a bunch and I have like more sort of like well-formed opinions, if that makes sense. Yeah, like one example is like basically around the concept of like, you know, decisive strategic advantage that like one actor could have over another actor. Yeah, like once I thought through it a bit more, I was like, yeah, I think it became less obvious to me, sort of like, you know, that there would be like this sort of thing that was like acted upon by an actual like, you know, country sort of like getting some decisive strategic advantage over another country, and then using this to like essentially like take over the other countries or take over the world. It's kind of unclear to me that this is really how it would look like, and this is kind of like the traditional, I think to some extent, the traditional conception of like what might happen. It's like the actor who gets super intelligence gets this advantage and then takes over. I think once actually kind of tried to think about it, it seemed more likely that like it's just kind of a scary thing to do if you're not like very confident that it'll work, and also like it's unclear how easy it will be to get like a DSA that doesn't involve like actually causing, you know, harm to people, or like causing harm to a bunch of people, and that's kind of like, I think something at least some people are kind of averse to if it's not necessary, especially if it involves causing harm to a lot of people. And then there's also like various deterrence mechanisms that I hadn't thought about, that like even if you break traditional nuclear deterrence, you might be able to do some like, you know, some kind of crazy stuff if you're willing to like gain like further deterrence. Anyway, so that's kind of like like, yeah, it basically became, that's like one thing is I think once I thought it through, I hadn't really thought this sort of thing through, but like it's just like really complicated, I think, and it's not as nearly as simple as like, oh, like, you know, one country, once they have the super intelligence, so like have some crazy advantage and then they'll be able to like impose their will, you know.
Cool. That's really helpful. And final question. I know we're coming up on time. If you could redirect like $10 million in AI funding today to make sure like this thing goes well, where would you put that?
Yeah, good question. I'm not aware. I mean, donate it to us is the funny answer, but I do think, but yeah, I think, probably something around AI policy. I mean, like, a basic answer is like Horizon. The Horizon does like a bunch of like training for basically like people who are getting into AI policy. I think they're called the Horizon Institute for Public Service. That's like one example, but also like, yeah, I think just generally like, yeah, I'm excited about doing things like policy advocacy, or like policy research. And I think there are various organizations in this sort of like, space. Another one is like ARI, Americans for Responsible Innovation. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good question. I think also right in particular, like, yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about this, but I think, there's just a very big gap in terms of like AI safety and kind of AGI safety people on the right of center. And so any way to kind of like try to bridge that gap, I think might be really good. But obviously, like, yeah, maybe some mixed feelings about depending on the sort of exact opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Eli, for being here and for presenting this amazing case study and leading us through some very very next couple of years. So you taking the time and meeting with us, and I'll be sure to get the recording your way once we have that available. So everyone, yeah, just give them a round of applause, and yeah, have a great rest of your days. Take care.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.